Hey, what's up, friends? Ray with Talking Timworks. How y'all doing? Now, ain't that an interesting looking blank? No, it's not in grain turning. That's actually a cross grain piece. And on top of that, it's also Quartersawn. So it's a real unique piece of wood that we got chucked up right here. Earlier in the day, I turned 5 cedar spatulas that I released a video for last week, and I'm thinking we need a pot or a container to hold all these spatulas in and display them in. So that's the plan for this interesting piece of wood. Okay, so if I remember correctly, this is a piece of silver maple, which is kind of on the softer side of maples. And what makes it unique is it's actually taller than it is wide. It's probably a good 6 to 7 inches tall versus about 5 inches wide, and it's quarter sawn, which will give you, if you're not familiar with quarter sawn, it will give you vertical rings instead of the normal horizontal rings. So, and it's a quarter sawn being where the rings are vertical, they're also very evenly spaced, and there isn't a whole lot of movement in the wood as it dries. It becomes a very stable piece. So this is a semi-dry, semi-green piece of silver maple that's quarter sawn. Like I said, about 7 inches tall by about 5 inches wide. I say it's 5 inches wide because that is what I chucked it up in, is 5 inch Vicmar shark jaws. And there's no tenon or anything. It was a round cut on a bandsaw. So we're going to form the tenon right now. And I'm playing around using spindle gouges more, just, for practice and just to get more familiar with the tool as opposed to a bowl gouge. Uh, they're perfectly fine on the outside of turnings like this where you're not overextended off the tool rest very far. There's a lot of mixed up information out there where people say, oh, you can't use a spindle gouge for this, or I think where a lot of it comes from is the actual classification or clarification of the actual tools that they're discussing. Okay, now a spindle gouge like this is a spindle detail gouge or a shallow fluted gouge, shallow fluted detail gouge, however you want to call it. All right, it's got a gouge of many different names, and it gets confused with in Facebook groups and forums with the spindle roughing gouge, which has a flat tang and is relatively weak in that tang and can snap and break under pressure. Now, this spindle gouge is also not as sturdy as a bowl gouge. Now, it doesn't have a flat tang. Its diameter or its tang is the same diameter as the bar stock all the way across. So this is a 1/2 inch tool in American measurements, meaning it measures the bar stock, the tool stock diameter, not the flute diameter. Okay, so it's a 1/2 inch gouge, and it's a 1/2 inch piece of bar stock all the way into the handle. The problem where it doesn't have the strength of a bowl gouge is in the geometry of a flute. The deep fluted bowl gouges are way more sturdy and are able to take the forces further off the tool rest than the spindle gouge with its shallow flute further off the tool rest. It's made for up close work. So when you're going along on the outside of a bowl, you can use a spindle detail gouge or a shallow fluted gouge. You can use them on the inside of shallow bowls. But when you start getting more than a couple of inches of overhang off the tool rest, that's when you're welcoming problems. And if you get a gnarly catch or something happens, the tool steel can actually break because it doesn't have the structural integrity of a deep fluted bowl gouge. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what you can use and what you can't use. Okay? But Richard Raffin goes over this in great detail. And I asked him in one of his videos, I was like, you know what, I noticed you use your spindle gouges on bowls a lot on the outside. Why is that? And he told me, just flat out, he's a high volume production turner, and spindle gouges are cheaper. Okay, so when you're constantly sharpening and moving through a lot of steel, it just makes sense to use the cheaper tool where applicable. So if you'll watch him, he does a lot of bowls the outside with the spindle gouge, but when it goes towards the inside of the bowl and there's more overhang off the tool rest, he uses a deep fluted bowl gouge. So I primarily learned from Richard, Tomislav, and Stuart Batty, and use their techniques and their teachings and instructions. So I don't just come up with this stuff randomly, you know. And I put a lot of research into it also. I don't want to spread half truths, or if I'm not sure about something, I usually don't talk about it. If I have a question about something, I just kind of keep it, you know, to myself, or I don't bring it up in discussions. But if I'm pretty sure and confident in what I am going to talk about, then I go ahead and talk about it. And so I like I said, I don't have any problem asking these guys uh, why they do something, or I'll ask them, hey, I noticed you do something like this or that. What's the reason? And most of them are very approachable. You know, I've talked to Stuart Batty on the phone, you know, about things. I've talked to Tomislav back and forth in messaging and texts and various other stuff, and Richard a couple of times in comments and responses. So, you know, if you ever have questions
That is some
about these
ugly
things,
looking wood.
ask us, ask them, because most guys are approachable and want to share their knowledge with the rest of the group. Okay, now that I got that kind of long rant out of the way, I fast forwarded through the bottom of this piece because I didn't like the way it turned out, and I was kind of fiddling around with the spindle gouge, and it took a while. So I just kind of skipped over that, and I don't like the design of it. So instead of just editing it out completely, I just left it in there fast forward, but we're going to get rid of it. And so right now I'm kind of playing with my shear scraper, trying to get a good finish on this soft maple. Soft maple is prone to tear out. It's a difficult wood to finish. And I consider soft maple, silver maple, red maple, box elder. Uh, I've never turned big leaf maple. I'm not sure where that falls into the Janka scales. But to me, anything that isn't sugar maple, which is hard maple, is basically soft maple. And so I didn't like the finish that much that was coming off that tool. So I grab another tool and I'm doing a shear scrape with my bowl gouge. And I'm seeing how the finish comes
Oh,
off that.
getting
You know,
stupid.
if you've got multiple tools in your toolbox, use them. Don't lock yourself into one tool and one tool only. Sometimes, you know, even though I was shear scraping with a shear scraper and I'm shear scraping with a bowl gouge, they're two different cutting surfaces. The shear scraper has a burr while this is a cutting edge. So even though the techniques are similar, the edge of the tool is different. And you have to find which one works out for these different woods. Some woods are picky, some woods will take anything. You know, hard maple is like that. Hard maple you can finish with just about any type of cut, scrape, whatever you want, and it finishes great. Soft maple, not so much. And so here's where I'm talking about. I didn't like that design, and so I'm getting rid of it. And I'm just peeling it away with the bowl gouge and taking it back down to basically just a tenon, where before it had a couple of beads. And this to me looks better. It looks more flat like a pot, whereas before it was kind of tapered down into a smaller base. And I don't know, I like this better. And that outer bead is actually the tenon. what I'm going to reverse and hold it on to. And so all I'm doing is just giving it a real simple bottom that I'm just making slightly concave because it's semi-green and can warp some. And then that's it. Because this is a basic utility piece. This is a utility pot. If it doesn't get used for spatulas and spoons, it will probably most likely be used for pencils and markers or something in that vein of utility use. So I'm not worried about it looking fancy or decorative. I want it more functional. And sometimes you just let the wood shine. Even though throughout this I kind of complain about the mold. And so that's an interesting subject in it itself, is that here in southeastern Michigan, and I'm saying here because at the time I filmed this video, it was still summertime and I was still living on Lake Erie. The maples around that area I have found get a kind of almost a mold into them, and I want to say it grows from the sugar. Me and David Swain from the Danger Shop have had this discussion, and we both have the problem. He doesn't live in Michigan, but he lives in the same region and gets the same wood. And it's weird when the centrifugal forces spin the sugars, is what it seems like. I don't know. But you get kind of a greenish effect to the wood and a mold, and it doesn't go away. You can't turn it away. You can't bleach it. It's in the wood. So I did a rough sanding there, got it all sanded. I just do a quick sanding of 120, 180, 240, 320. That's how I sand. And then I added Axe's abrasive paste. And I'm basically doing the bottom. I want the bottom cleaned and finished before I reverse it. That's why I didn't waste my time going up to the top, because that's not shaped or finished yet. So I just want the bottom tenon to look good, because I do not want to reverse this bowl and remove that tenon. It's going to stay. So the bottom is now finished, and that's how it's going to look. It's just a more simple production type turning when you just leave a foot at the bottom that is the tenon. And because like I said, this isn't a fancy piece of art. This isn't going to win any awards. This is just a functional piece, and I don't want to waste the time and effort to reverse it, find a jam chuck, make a jam chuck, and get rid of the tenon. I'd rather just make it fit a perfect fit in the chuck and leave it on there, and then get to hollowing and get back to work. You know what I'm saying, friends? I mean, not every piece has to be a knockout, stellar piece of art. Some of them can just be utility pieces that have a nice fit and function, and that's it. You know, they don't need to be grandiose pieces of art. This, if I don't sell it as a spatula tray or anything like that, it will most likely be a pencil pot for my son's school desk. And he can put his Sharpies and his markers and his highlighters and pens and pencils and erasers and all that stuff in one spot on his desk. And I think that's what I'm actually going to do now that we're talking about this. So now it's a game of trying to keep it a smooth cylinder and straight walls going vertical to the top. And you can really kind of mess up here. If you take too much wood away, you can never put it back, and that will mess up your profile. All right, and if you start sloping it towards the top inward and taking too much off the top, then you'll have a barrel look instead of a pot look. So these cuts are smooth and they're light. I'm not hogging off material because I want a good looking cylinder. When you make simple pieces, the simple things have to be done right, or else they become glaring defects. Believe me, I mean, it is hard sometimes to turn a straight piece. You wouldn't think it's that difficult, but try turning a couple of French rolling pins and see how fun those are to get a straight across finish and symmetrical and even tapered ends. It's actually kind of challenging for something that looks so completely simple and basic. So, learning from earlier, I found that I didn't like the finish coming off the shear scraper, so I don't even go through that step, and I just use my bowl gouge and shear scrape. And you can see the very fine and delicate ribbons that are coming off of here. And a lot of the noise in the background is because it's the middle of summer. It's probably 90 degrees in the shop, and I've got a big shop fan going. And it's just part of summer. You know, in the wintertime, I will do a lot more end turning, talking into a mic, talking while I'm turning. But in the summertime, I really have to do voiceovers and really lower the volume of the actual turning because of all the background noises that's going on. I've got a shop fan going on, I've got a dust collection going on, and it just really makes for a loud, annoying video that I don't want to have y'all suffer through. So I try to edit the noise down and then just make up for it with this kind of casual, you know, chit chat with y'all and kind of explain what's going on. And if I'm not explaining what I'm going on, I'm just, you know, just talking and filling up space, man, having a good time. Y'all are my friends. I don't have real friends in real life. You know, I have my friends that, you know, comment through my YouTube videos. So that might change here. You know, I just made the move to Texas. I'm actually doing this voice over in my camper. I moved ahead of my wife. I brought my camper down. I'm waiting for the house to close, and I'm just hanging out. I normally try to upload every week, but this move has really put a hold on things, and I'm trying to get it done in here, but the AC in this thing blows really loud. So I'm hoping it isn't a butchered video for y'all. I'm hoping y'all can get through it, but it's still 90 degrees in Texas here. And so the AC's nonstop in this little camper that I'm kind of living in. So here we go. I like the way the outside looked. Got it sanded, and so now we're just putting the Axe abrasive paste on. If you guys don't know what it does, it kind of just takes the finish up to 1,000 grit simulation. It has frangible diatomaceous earth or pumice. It's a frangible grit that slowly disintegrates over time and leaves you with a nice smooth finish. There are other products out there under various names, but they all basically are abrasive paste. And so what I'm doing here, this is a little 3/8 spindle gouge. This is another technique I learned from Richard, and I am just using this as a depth gauge. You could, of course, use a drill bit and put your drill bit in a handle, but like I said, this is a tall piece. It's 7 inches. Most drill bits aren't that long. So you would have to get the custom, I don't know what they are, aircraft drill bits or whatever, and then put those in the handle. But this little 3/8 spindle gouge does the job. And you just work your way down, take a little bit of material out, and you got to clear it out, because otherwise it's going to expand in there and get hot, and you don't want it to get hot, expand, and jam up and rip that tool out of your hand. So, you know, take your time, take as many steps as it takes to get to the bottom. Don't overshoot the bottom and punch a hole through the bottom either. But yeah, so that just gives me a depth. And once I reach the bottom of that, I know not to go any further, and that's where I want the bottom of my piece to be. And again, although this looks like it's an end grain turning, it's not. It's cross grain orientation. So I am hollowing it just like I would a normal bowl. I'm starting from the middle, and I'm working towards the outside, and I'm just using a bowl gouge. I'm not using anything fancy or funky. I didn't, you know, I'm not one to sit there and use a Forstner bit. I'm more comfortable, and I think it's faster to use a gouge to hollow out the middle, or a scraper. I'm not a big Forstner bit type of guy. I use them to start, more recessed mortises, and I've used it also to start the hollowing on a hollow form, where I've used it as, okay, I used an 1.1 Forstner bit, and that's how wide I want the entrance into the hollow form. That's about the only time I use them. I'd just rather use my turning tools. I don't like sitting at the back of the lathe holding on to a drill bit and going in and out with a drill bit. I'd much rather use a gouge. I enjoy using my gouges. They're fun. I don't like using drill bits and other stuff. I don't find them fun or enjoyable. I do find hollowing bowls to be very enjoyable, and I've got multiple videos out where I am just roughing out bowls, just because I find the act of turning fun and enjoyable. That's also why I don't do a lot of pens or bottle stoppers or any of those smaller little knick-knack projects, because it's more setup, finishing, and sanding, and it seems like you're spending more time doing everything but turning, and that's not what I enjoy. I enjoy turning. I enjoy moving my gouge through the wood and seeing what I can do. I find it an amazing...
How long has that been off?
I don't even know what to call it. An amazing craft, right? Or a trade. To me, watching the ribbons fly and the material removed and the shape taking form, to me, is just amazing. I can watch myself do it over and over. I can watch other turners do it, and it's even more fun to do it yourself. You know, to have the gouge in your hand and just remove the material and shape the piece. There's nothing like it in the world that I can explain or come close to explaining. It's just a unique experience, and I love it. It's my passion. I'm glad I get to share it with you guys. So now back to the piece. This is a different or an interesting puzzle to solve, because it's a bowl. It's not an end grain turning, and it's deep. It's very deep and narrow at the same time. So it's I don't know. I don't know if they make specialty tools or what specialty tools you would use for that. But right now I'm just going at it with a gouge and treating it like a bowl until so I can't really get to the bottom very well at all, okay? I use a 40-degree nose angle, and even with a 60-degree nose angle, it would be very difficult to walk that gouge across the bottom safely, and you wouldn't even be able to do it with bevel support with that 60 degree, because the walls are so steep that you wouldn't be able to match the 60 degree of the nose. You might be able to get 85 degrees to 80 if you're lucky, and that would be you rubbing against the wall and your nose being at the very center of the piece. So I'm kind of just riding inside and down and hoping to keep everything uniform and straight. A problem that I'm having is the ribbons. If I mess up, they want to bind up inside and not fly out like they are, and then that kind of messes things up. And then it, like I said, at the bottom, I'm trying not to get a slope at the bottom that I have to work away, but I am. So this is going to present its own challenges. Oops, I cut myself right there on the thumb with the flute of the bow gouge. That thing is sharp, and if it can hog through wood like this, you know, it can hog through your fingers just as easy. So that is something to remember, is when you're trying to clean your flute or get the ribbons and the chips out of the flute, be extremely careful for your fingers, because that steel is razor sharp and unforgiving. And so, you know, I'm kind of a knucklehead and stubborn, and I don't ever get a band-aid on this thing. And so now I'm constantly kind of, anytime I bump my thumb, it reopens the cut, and then I have to make the conscious effort not to bleed on the wood and stain the blood or stain the wood with my own blood. It's kind of a weird problem to have and a situation to be in. I mean, I guess the solution would be to just stop what you're doing and go get a Band-Aid and stop the bleeding. But, I'm a knucklehead like that and not really into it. So I just deal with it. But yeah, it's a funny problem to have. This is a really cool piece, though. For in its simplicity, it is a very cool piece. I do have that one little burn line on there to add a little bit of contrast to it. But other than that, it's kind of just a boring pot. But it's a fun turn. It's, usually by now, you start swinging your gouge out and you follow an arc and a curve. But not with this. You're in the same position and you're going down. And you can see I'm having problems with these ribbons going everywhere and getting stuck. And man, it's an interesting piece. I need to do a couple more like it. I don't know
Getting there, boys.
if I'll ever get Quartersawn boards that thick again. That was very early on in my chainsawing, making blanks. I attacked some giant maple logs, and since they were so big, I took out a lot of area on the pith when I cut the pith out. And so I don't know if I'll ever come across wood like that again moving down to Texas. I'm not sure if I'll find maple like that. I don't know if I'll find cherry or walnut like I have in the past. I'll find oak. I'm surrounded by oak. But I don't know how well I'm going to do finding the maples, the walnuts, and the cherries. That kind of bums me out. That was probably my highest point living in Michigan is the wonderful hardwood forests that they have there. But life moves on and we'll just adjust. I did happen to sneak a couple of pieces down from Michigan with me into Texas, but, it's not going to last me forever. So, we will probably be seeing a lot of oak and pecan here in the future because that's what grows in abundance by me now, moving forward. And so I'm trying to keep the walls thick, but as you can see, it's wanting to kind of follow the form of a bowl. I'm not getting the straight walls and the thickness down. It's extra thick in the bottom. So I'm going to have to come up with a solution to correct this. And my solution is going to be something that y'all don't see me turn very often with. And that is carbide tools. I'm by no means a carbide hater. I learned on carbide, taught myself a carbide, and they have their place. I do believe they are a decent learning tool, but the finish on them is what led me to learn traditional tools. I hate sanding, and they don't work too well on soft maples. So what I did was I took a robust box tool rest, put it inside the form, and I'm now using a large. I can't remember the sizes of them. There's like 2 or 3 sizes of carbide. This is a large round cutter, and I'm using Carter Tools, the axe. So this is their full size line, and the handles are an interesting profile, kind of like an axe. They're not round or cylinders, but they're like an axe handle. So they've got the flats on the side, and they feel good and comfortable. And so now I can tell, the red one is my round cutter, the blue one is my square cutter. So what I'm trying to do here is flatten out the bottom. I don't want a curved bottom, I want a flat bottom. So now I've transitioned over to a square scraper to try and clean up the bottom. And so what this does, this box tool rest, it lets me go in further with support of a tool rest without having tool overhang. And you get less chatter on your and flex on your tools. So that's what it was designed for, is to go into vessels, narrow vessels like this, and give you support further in. and it does a good job, but I'm not happy with the finish I'm getting, and because I hate sanding. So then I've grabbed my third one now, and this is a Ron Campbell Pro version, and it's got the little cutter on there, the little round cutter. And so I'm trying to get in there and shear scrape at an angle. And the difference with the Ron's tool, Ron Campbell, versus the other tools is it's profiled so that you can shear scrape with it. The other ones are made out of square stock and have flat bottoms, and they're harder to. If you try to shear scrape, you're rolling it over onto a corner. But Ron's tool isn't like that. It's made for shear scraping, and it has a rounded bottom on the tool stock. And so that's the Ron Campbell one, and he's the owner of AZ Carbide and sells carbide cutters. He's a great dude to deal business with. Go check out his website. If you need carbide cutters, he makes a really cool one-way coring system carbide cutter too. So they're about half the price of one-way. So go check it out. He's a real cool dude, and he has a great website and sells great stuff. So now, trying to fix that up. Like I said, I wasn't happy with the finish I was getting, so I just kind of just jammed my robust shear scraping tool rest in there because it fits in there nice, and I'm using my gouge again. And I'm working the corner because the corner is rounded, and you can see I'm just hogging off way more material than I was with the carbide. And I get impatient sometimes, and I like to move material. So the camera died, battery died. I got it rounded off. I sanded it, and now we're putting the Axe abrasive paste on the inside because we want a clean and even surface all the way around throughout the piece. Right? You got to spend as much time on the inside as you do on the outside, because that's what people are going to do. They pick it up and they start putting their fingers in there and feeling around. So you can't skip on the inside. I changed the lighting right here because that little light was washing it out. And I want you all to be able to see this cool looking wood once this lathe slows down and we show off the piece. I left it finished just simply like this. There was no sealer and no top coat. It's just simply Axe abrasive
All right.
paste.
Well,
And this is
there's some
Quartersawn
kind of
soft
moldy maple.
really interesting piece.
Quartersawn.
It's all heartwood. There's no sapwood
Kind of
because
a
it's
cool
right by the
piece.
pit. And yeah, thanks
But
for
this
checking it out,
is
friends.
a
I really
spatula
appreciate
holder.
y'all for watching it. If you hung around this long,
I
please give
turned
me
5
that like.
spatulas this morning earlier.
Subscribe to the channel
and
if
so
you
I needed
already
a holder
haven't.
for 'em.
Share it to all
here we
your
go.
friends and social media out there. And leave me some comments down below. What do you think? Have you ever seen Quartersawn boards that thick, that tall? I love them. It's a
Quartersawn
cool thing to
maple.
have a piece that tall that's Quartersawn. As you see, the annual rings are vertical, almost like an ingrain turning.